The Revolt of Islam, Canto 10. Was there a human spirit in the steed that thus with his proud voice, ere night was gone, he broke our linked rest? Or do indeed all living things a common nature own, and thought erect an universal throne, where many shapes one tribute ever bear, and earth their mutual mother? Does she groan to see her sons contend, and makes she bare her breast that all in peace its drainless stores may share? I have heard friendly sounds from many a tongue which was not human. The lone nightingale has answered me with her most soothing song out of her ivy bower, when I sate pale with grief and sighed beneath. From many a dale the antelopes who flocked for food have spoken with happy sounds and motions that avail like man's own speech, and such was now the token of waning night, whose calm by that proud neigh was broken. Each night that mighty steed bore me abroad, and I returned with food to our retreat. And dark intelligence, the blood which flowed over the fields had stained the courser's feet. Soon the dust drinks that bitter dew, then meet the vulture and the wild dog and the snake, the wolf and the hyena grey, and eat the dead in horrid truce. Their throngs did make behind the steed a chasm like waves in a ship's wake. For from the utmost realms of earth come pouring the banded slaves, whom every despot sent at that throne traitor's summons, like the roaring of fire, whose floods the wild deer circumvent in the scorched pastures of the south. So bent the armies of the leagued kings around their files of steel and flame. The continent trembled as with a zone of ruin bound. Beneath their feet the sea shook with their navy's sound. From every nation of the earth they came, the multitude of moving, heartless things, whom slaves call men. Obediently they came, like sheep whom from the fold the shepherd brings, to the stall red with blood. Their many kings led them thus erring from their native land, Tartar and Frank, and millions whom the wings of Indian breezes lull, and many a band the Arctic anarchs sent, and Indumi's sand. Fertile in prodigies and lies, so their strange natures made a brotherhood of ill. The desert savage ceased to grasp in fear his Asian shield and bow, when at the will of Europe's subtler son the bolt would kill some shepherd sitting on a rock secure. But smiles of wondering joy his face would fill, and savage sympathy those slaves impure, each one the other thus from ill to ill did lure. For traitorously did that foul tyrant robe his countenance in lies, even at the hour when he was snatched from death. Then o'er the globe, with secret signs from many a mountain tower, was smoke by day and fire by night, the power of kings and priests. Those dark conspirators he called, they knew his cause their own, and swore like wolves and serpents to their mutual wars. Strange truce with many a rite, which earth and heaven abhors. Myriads had come, millions were on their way. The tyrant passed, surrounded by the steel of hired assassins, through the public way. Choked with his country's dead, his footsteps reel on the fresh blood he smiles. I now I feel I am a king in truth, he said, and took his royal seat, and bade the torturing wheel be brought, and fire and pincers and the hook and scorpions, that his soul on its revenge might look. But first go slay the rebels, why return the victor bands? He said, millions yet live, of whom the weakest, with whom one word might turn the scales of victory yet. Let none survive, but those within the walls. Each fifth shall give the expiation of his brethren here. Go forth and waste and kill. O king, forgive my speech, a soldier answered, but we fear the spirits of the night, and morn is drawing near. For we were slaying still without remorse, and now that dreadful chief beneath my hand defenceless lay, when on a hell-black horse, an angel bright as day, waving a brand which flashed among the stars, passed. Dost thou stand parleying with me, thou wretch? The king replied. Slaves bind him to the wheel, and of this band, whoso will drag that woman to his side, that scared him thus, may burn his dearest foe beside. And gold and glory shall be his. Go forth. They rushed into the plain. Loud was the roar of their career. The horsemen shook the earth. The wheeled artillery's speed the pavement tore. The infantry file after file did pour. Their clouds on the utmost hills. 5 days they slew among the wasted fields. The 6th saw gore stream through the city. On the 7th the dew of slaughter became stiff, and there was peace anew. Peace in the desert fields and villages, between the glutted beasts and mangled death. Peace in the silent streets, save when the cries of victims to their fiery judgment led, made pale their voiceless lips, who seemed to dread, even in their dearest kindred, lest some tongue be faithless to the fear yet unbetrayed. Peace in the tyrant's palace, where the throng waste the triumphal hours in festival and song. Day after day the burning sun rolled on. Over the death-polluted land it came, out of the east like fire, and fiercely shone a lamp of autumn, ripening with its flame the few lowed ears of corn. The sky became stagnate with heat, so that each cloud and blast languished and died. The thirsting air did claim all moisture, and a rotting vapour passed from the unburied dead, invisible and fast. First want, then plague came on the beasts. Their food failed, and they drew the breath of its decay. Millions on millions, whom the scent of blood had lured, or who from regions far away had tracked the hosts in festival array, from their dark deserts gaunt and wasting now, stalked like fell shades among their perished prey. In their green eyes a strange disease did glow. They sank in hideous spasm, or pain severe and slow. The fish were poisoned in the streams, the birds in the green woods perished, the insect race was withered up, the scattered flocks and herds who had survived the wild beasts' hungry chase died moaning, each upon the other's face in helpless agony gazing. Round the city all night the lean hyenas their sad case like starving infants wailed, a woeful ditty, and many a mother wept, pierced with unnatural pity. Amid the aerial minarets on high, the Ethiopian vultures fluttering fell from their long line of brethren in the sky, startling the concourse of mankind. Too well these signs the coming mischief did foretell. Strange panic first, a deep and sickening dread within each heart, like ice did sink and dwell, a voiceless thought of evil which did spread, with the quick glance of eyes like withering lightnings shed. Day after day, when the year wanes, the frosts strip its green crown of leaves till all is bare. So on those strange and congregated hosts came famine, a swift shadow, and the air groaned with the burden of a new despair. Famine, than whom misrule no deadlier daughter feeds from 1,000 breasts, though sleeping there with idleness eyes like life, faith and plague and slaughter, a ghastly brood conceived of Lethe's sullen water. There was no food, the corn was trampled down, the flocks and herds had perished on the shore, the dead and putrid fish were ever thrown, the deeps were foodless and the winds no more creaked with the weight of birds, but as before those winged things sprang forth, were void of shade, the vines and orchards, autumn's golden store, were burned, so that the meanest food was weighed with gold, and avarice died before the God it made. There was no corn in the wide marketplace, all loathliest things, even human flesh, was sold. They weighed it in small scales, and many a face was fixed in eager horror then. His gold the miser brought, the tender maid grown bold, through hunger bared her scorn charms in vain. The mother brought her eldest born, controlled by instinct blind as love, but turned again and bade her infant suck, and died in silent pain. Then hell blew plague upon the race of man. Oh, from the sheathed steel so late which gave oblivion to the dead, when the streets ran with brothers' blood, oh, that the earthquake's grave would gape, or ocean lift its stifling wave. Vain cries throughout the streets, thousand pursued, each by his fiery torture howl and rave, or sit in frenzy's unimagined mood, upon fresh heaps of dead and ghastly multitude. It was not hunger now, but thirst. Each well was choked with rotting corpses, and became a cauldron of green mist, made of visible at sunshine rise. Thither still the myriads came, seeking to quench the agony of the flame, which raged like poison through their bursting veins. Naked they were from torture, without shame, spotted with nameless scars and lurid blains, childhood and youth and age writhing in savage pains. It was not thirst but madness, many saw their own lean image everywhere it went, a ghastlier self beside them, till the awe of that dread sight to self-destruction sent. Those shrieking victims some ere left was spent, sought with a horrid sympathy to shed contagion on the sound, and others rent their matted hair and cried aloud, "We tread on fire, the avenging power is hell on earth has spread." Sometimes the living by the dead were hid, near the great fountain in the public square, where corpses made a crumbling pyramid. Under the sun was heard one stifled prayer for life, in the hot silence of the air, and strange 'twas amid that hideous heap to see some shrouded in their long and golden hair, as if not dead but slumbering quietly like forms which sculptors' cars then loved to agony. Famine had spared the palace of the king. He rioted in festival the while, he and his guards and priests, but plague did fling one shadow upon all. Famine can smile on him who brings it food, and pass with guile of thankful falsehood like a courtier grey, the house dog of the throne. But many a mile comes plague, a winged wolf, who loathes alway the garbage and the scum that strangers make her prey. So near the throne, amid the gorgeous feast, sheathed in resplendent arms, or loosely dight to luxury, ere the mockery yet had ceased, that lingered on his lips, the warrior's might was loosened, and a new and ghastlier night, in dreams of frenzy, lapped his eyes. He fell headlong, or with stiff eyeballs sate upright, among the guests, or raving mad did tell strange truths, a dying seer of dark oppression's hell. The princes and the priests were pale with terror, that monstrous faith wherewith they ruled mankind fell like a shaft loosed by the bowman's error. On their own hearts they sought, and they could find no refuge. 'Twas the blind who led the blind, so through the desolate streets to the high fane the many-tongued and endless armies wind in sad procession, each among the train to his own idol lifts his supplications vain. O God, they cried, we know our secret pride has scorned thee, and thy worship and thy name. Secure in human power we have defied thy fearful might. We bend in fear and shame before thy presence, with the dust we claim. Kindred, be merciful, O King of heaven, most justly have we suffered for thy fame. Made dim, but be at length our sins forgiven, ere to despair and death thy worshippers be driven. O King of glory, thou alone hast power, who can resist thy will, who can restrain thy wrath, when on the guilty thou dost shower the shafts of thy revenge, a blistering rain. Greatest and best, be merciful again. Have we not stabbed thine enemies, and made the earth an altar, and the heavens a fane? where thou wert worshipped with their blood, and laid those hearts in dust which would thy speech searchless works have weighed. Well didst thou listen on this impious city, thine angels of revenge recall them now. Thy worshippers abased here kneel for pity, and bind their souls by an immortal vow. We swear by thee, and to our oath do thou give sanction from thine hell of fiends and flame, that we will kill with fire and torment slow the last of those who mocked thy holy name, and scorned the sacred laws thy prophets did proclaim. Thus they with trembling limbs and pallid lips worship their own heart's image, dim and vast, scared by the shade wherewith they would eclipse the light of other minds. Troubled they pass from the great temple, fiercely still and fast the arrows of the plague among them fell, and they on one another gazed aghast, and through the host's contention wild further befell, as each of his own god the wondrous works did tell. And Oromai's Joshua and Marmot, Moses and Bud, Zerdust and Brahm and Foe, a tumult of strange names which never met before, as watchwords of a single woe, arose each raging votary, gun to throw aloft his armed hands, and each did howl, our God alone is God, and slaughter now would have gone forth, when from beneath a cowl a voice came forth, which pierced like ice through every soul. 'Twas an Iberian priest from whom it came, a zealous man who led the legioned west with words which faith and pride had steeped in flame, to quell the unbelievers. A dire guest even to his friends was he, for in his breast did hate and guile lie watchful intertwined, twin serpents in one deep and winding nest. He loathed all faith because his own, and pined to wreak his fear of heaven in vengeance on mankind. But more he loathed and hated the clear light of wisdom and free thought, and more did fear lest kindled once its beams might pierce the night. Even where his idols stood, for far and near did many a heart in Europe leap to hear that faith and tyranny were trampled down. Many a pale victim doomed for truth to share the murderer's cell, or see with helpless groan the priests his children drag for slaves to serve their own. He dared not kill the infidels with fire or steel. In Europe the slow agonies of legal torture mocked his keen desire, so he made truce with those who did despise the expiation and the sacrifice, that though detested Islam's kindred creed might crush for him those deadlier enemies, for fear of God did in his bosom breed a jealous hate of man, an unreposing need. Peace, peace, he cried, when we are dead the day of judgment comes, and all shall surely know whose God is God. Each fearfully shall pay the errors of his faith in endless woe, but there is sent a mortal vengeance now on earth, because an impious race had spurned him whom we all adore, a subtle foe, by whom for ye this dread reward was earned, and kingly thrones which rest on faith nigh overturned. Think ye because ye weep and kneel and pray that God will lull the pestilence? It rose even from beneath his throne, when many a day his mercy soothed it to a dark repose. It walks upon the earth to judge his foes, and what are thou and I that we should deign to curb his ghastly minister, or close the gates of death ere they received the twain who shook with mortal spells his undefended reign? Aye, there is famine in the gulf of hell, its giant worms of fire forever yawn, their lurid eyes are on us. Those who fell by the swift shafts of pestilence ere dawn are in their jaws, their hunger for the spawn of Satan, with whom their own brethren who were sent to make our souls their spoil. See, they fawn like dogs, and they sleep with luxury spent, when those detested hearts their iron fangs have rent. Our God made thine lull pestilence to sleep. Pile high the pyre of expiation now, a forest spoil of boughs, and on the heap pour venomous gums, which sullenly and slow, when touched by flame, shall burn and melt and flow, a stream of clinging fire, and fix on high a net of iron, and spread forth below a couch of snakes and scorpions, and the fry of centipedes and worms, earth's hellish progeny. Let Laon and Leone of that pyre, linked tight with burning brass, perish. Then pray that with this sacrifice the withering ire of heaven may be appeased. He ceased, and they a space stood silent, as far, far away the echoes of his voice among them died. And he knelt down upon the dust, alway muttering the curses of his speechless pride, while shame and fear and awe the armies did divide. His voice was like a blast that burst the portal of fabled hell, and as he spake each one saw gape beneath the chasm of a fire immortal, and heaven above seemed cloven where on a throne, girt round with storms and shadows, sate alone their king and judge, fear filled in every breast, all natural pity them, a fear unknown before, and with an inward fire possessed, they raged like homeless beasts whom burning woods invest. 'Twas morn at noon, the public crier went forth, proclaiming through the living and the dead, the monarch saith that his great empire's worth is set on Laon and Leone's head. He who but one yet living here can lead, or who the life from both their hearts can wring, shall be the kingdom's heir, a glorious meed. But he who both alive can hither bring, the princess shall espouse, and reign an equal king. Ere night the pyre was piled, the net of iron was spread above, the fearful couch below. It overtopped the towers that did environ that spacious square. For fear is never slow to build the thrones of hate, her mate and foe. So she scourged forth the maniac multitude to rear this pyramid tottering and slow, plague-stricken, foodless, like lean herds pursued by gadflies. They have piled the heath and gums and wood. Night came in a starless and moonless gloom, until the dawn those hosts of many a nation stood round the pile, as near one lover's tomb. Two gentle sisters mourned their desolation, and in the silence of that expectation was heard on high the reptile's hiss and crawl. It was so deep, save when the devastation of the swift pest, with fearful interval, marking its path with shrieks, among the crowd would fall. Morn came among those sleepless multitude, madness and fear and plague and famine still heaped corpse on corpse, as in autumnal woods the frosts of many a wind with dead leaves fill earth's cold and sullen brooks in silence. Still the pale survivors stood, ere noon the fear of hell became a panic, which did kill like hunger or disease, with whispers drear as hush, hark, come they yet, just heaven thine hour is near. And priests rushed through their ranks, some counterfeiting the rage they did inspire, some mad indeed with their own lies. They said their God was waiting to see his enemies writhe and burn and bleed, and that till then the snakes of hell had need of human souls. 300 furnaces soon blazed through the wide city, where with speed men brought their infidel kindred to appease God's wrath, and while they burned, knelt round on quivering knees. The noontide sun was darkened with that smoke, the winds of eve dispersed those ashes grey. The madness which these rites had lulled awoke again at sunset. Who shall dare to say the deeds which night and fear brought forth, or weigh in balance just the good and evil there? He might man's deep and searchless heart display, and cast a light on those dim labyrinths where hope, near imagined chasms, is struggling with despair. 'Tis said a mother dragged 3 children then to those fierce flames which roast the eyes in the head, and laughed and died, and that unholy men, feasting like fiends upon the infidel dead, looked from their meal and saw an angel tread the visible floor of heaven. And it was she, and on that night one without doubt or dread came to the fire and said, "Stop, I am he, kill me. They burned them both with hellish mockery. And one by one that night young maidens came, beauteous and calm, like shapes of living stone, clothed in the light of dreams, and by the flame, which shrank as overgorged, they laid them down, and sung a low sweet song, of which alone one word was heard, and that was liberty, and that some kissed their marble feet with moan like love, and died, and then that they did die with happy smiles which sunk in white tranquillity. The Revolt of Islam, Canto 11. She saw me not, she heard me not, alone upon the mountain's dizzy brink she stood. She spake not, breathed not, moved not, there was thrown over her look the shadow of a mood which only closed the heart in solitude, a thought of voiceless depth. She stood alone, above the heavens were spread, below the flood was murmuring in its caves, the wind had blown her hair apart, through which her eyes and forehead shone. A cloud was hanging o'er the western mountains, before its blue and moveless depth were flying grey mists poured forth from the unresting fountains of darkness in the north. The day was dying. Sudden the sun shone forth, its beams were lying like boiling gold on ocean strange to see, and on the shattered vapours which, defying the power of light in vain, tossed restlessly in the red heaven like wrecks in a tempestuous sea. It was a stream of living beams, whose bank on either side by the clouds cleft was made, and where its chasms that flood of glory drank, its waves gushed forth like fire, and if swayed by some mute tempest rolled on her, the shade of her bright image floated on the river of liquid light, which then did end and fade. Her radiant shape upon its verge did shiver, aloft her flowing hair like strings of flame did quiver. I stood beside her, but she saw me not. She looked upon the sea and skies and earth, rapture and love and admiration wrought, a passion deeper far than tears or mirth, or speech or gesture, or whatever has birth from common joy, which with the speechless feeling that led her there united and shot forth from her far eyes a light of deep revealing, all but her dearest self from my regard concealing. Her lips were parted, and the measured breath was now heard there. Her dark and intricate eyes, orb within orb, deeper than sleep or death, absorbed the glories of the burning skies, which mingling with her heart's deep ecstasies, burst from her looks and gestures, and a light of liquid tenderness like love did rise from her whole frame, an atmosphere which quite arrayed her in its beams tremulous and soft and bright. She would have clasped me to her glowing frame, those warm and odorous lips might soon have shed on mine the fragrance and the invisible flame, which now the cold wind stole. She would have laid upon my languid heart her dearest head. I might have heard her voice, tender and sweet. Her eyes mingling with mine might soon have fed my soul with their joy. One moment yet I gazed. We parted then, never again to meet. Never but once to meet on earth again. She heard me as I fled, her eager tones sunk on my heart, and almost wove a chain around my will to link it with her own, so that my stern resolve was almost gone. I cannot reach thee, whither dost thou fly? My steps are faint, come back, thou dearest one. Return, ah me, return. The wind passed by, on which those accents died, faint, far and lingeringly. Woe, woe, that moonless midnight! Want and pests were horrible, but one more fell doth rear as in a hydra's swarming lair, its crests eminent among those victims, even the fear of hell, each girt by the hot atmosphere of his blind agony, like a scorpion stung by his own rage upon his burning bier, of circling coals of fire, but still there clung one hope, like a keen sword on starting threads uphung. Not death, death was no more refuge or rest, not life, it was despair to be, not sleep, for fiends and chasms of fire had dispossessed all natural dreams. To wake was not to weep, but to gaze mad and pallid at the leap to which the future, like a snaky scourge or like some tyrant's eye, which eye doth keep its withering beam upon its slaves, did urge. Their steps they heard the roar of hell's sulphurous surge. Each of that multitude alone, and lost to sense of outward things, one hope yet new, as on a foam-girt crag some seaman tossed, stares at the rising tide, or like the crew whilst now the ship is splitting through and through. Each if the tramp of a far steed was heard, starting from sick despair, or if there flew one murmur on the wind, or if some word which none can gather, yet the distant crowd has stirred. Why became cheeks wan with the kiss of death, paler from hope? They had sustained despair. Why watched whose myriads with suspended breath, sleepless a second night? They are not here, the victims, and hour by hour of vision drear. Warm corpses fall upon the clay-cold dead, and even in death their lips are wreathed with fear. The crowd is mute and moveless over her head, silent, Actorous shrines, hearest thou not the tread of rushing feet, laughter, the shout, the scream of triumph not to be contained? See, hark, they come, give way, alas, ye deem falsely 'tis but a crowd of maniacs stark, driven like a troop of spectres through the dark, from the choked well whence a bright death fire sprung, a lurid earth star which dropped many a spark from its blue train, and spreading widely clung to their wild hair like mist the topmost pines among. And many from the crowd collected there joined that strange dance in fearful sympathies. There was the silence of a long despair, when the last echo of those terrible cries came from a distant street, like agonies stifled afar before the tyrant's throne. All night his aged senate sate, their eyes in stony expectation fixed, when one sudden before them stood, a stranger and alone. Dark priests and haughty warriors gazed on him with baffled wonder, for a hermit's vest concealed his face. But when he spake, his tone ere yet the matter did their thoughts arrest, earnest, benignant, calm, as from a breast void of all hate or terror, made them start, for as with gentle accents he addressed his speech to them, on each unwilling heart unusual awe did fall, a spirit-quelling dart. Ye princes of the earth, ye sit aghast and at the ruin which yourselves have made. Yes, desolation heard your trumpets blast, and sprang from sleep dark. Terror has obeyed your bidding. Oh, that I, whom ye have made your foe, could set my dearest enemy free from pain and fear, but evil casts a shade which cannot pass so soon, and hate must be the nurse and parent still of an ill progeny. Ye turn to heaven for aid in your distress. Alas, that ye, the mighty and the wise, who if ye dared might not aspire to less than ye conceive of power, should fear the lies which thou didst frame for mysteries to blind your slaves. Consider your own thought. night, an empty and a cruel sacrifice ye now prepare for a vain idol wrought out of the fears and hate which vain desires have brought. Ye seek for happiness, alas, the day ye find it not in luxury, nor in gold, nor in the fame, nor in the envied sway, for which, O willing slaves, to custom hold, severe task, mistress, ye your hearts have sold. Ye seek for peace, and when ye die to dream no evil dreams, all mortal things are cold and senseless then. If aught survive, I deem it must be love and joy, for their immortal seem. Fear not the future, weep not for the past. Oh, could I win your ears to dare be now glorious and great and calm, that ye would cast into the dust those symbols of your woe, purple and gold and steel, that ye would go proclaiming to the nations whence ye came, that want and plague and fear from slavery flow, and that mankind is free, and that the shame of royalty and faith is lost in freedom's fame. If thus, 'tis well, if not, I come to say that Laon, while the strangers spoke, among the council's sudden tumult and affray, arose, for many of those warriors young had on his eloquent accents fed and hung. Like bees on mountain flowers they knew the truth, and from their thrones in vindication sprung the men of faith and law. Then without ruth drew forth their secret steel and stabbed each ardent youth. They stabbed them in the back and sneered a slave who stood behind the throne. Those corpses drew each to its bloody dark and secret grave, and one more daring raised his steel anew to pierce the stranger. What hast thou to do with me, poor wretch? Calm, solemn and severe, that voice unstrung his sinews, and he threw his dagger on the ground, and pale with fear sate silently. His voice then did the stranger rear. It doth avail not that I weep for ye. Ye cannot change, since ye are old and grey, and ye have chosen your lot. Your fame must be a book of blood, whence in a milder day men shall learn truth when ye are wrapped in clay. Now ye shall triumph. I am Lion's friend, and him to your revenge will I betray. So ye concede one easy boon, attend, for now I speak of things which ye can apprehend. There is a people mighty in its youth, a land beyond the oceans of the west, where though with rudest rites freedom and truth are worshipped from a glorious mother's breast, who since high Athens fell among the rest sate like the queen of nations, but in woe, by inbred monsters outraged and oppressed, turns to her chainless child for succour now. It draws the milk of power in wisdom's fullest flow. That land is like an eagle whose young gaze feeds on the noontide beam, whose golden plume floats moveless on the storm, and in the blaze of sunrise gleams, when earth is wrapped in gloom. An epitaph glory for the tomb of murdered Europe, may thy fame be made. Great people as the sands shalt thou become, thy growth is swift as morn. When night must fade, the multitudinous earth shall sleep beneath thy shade. Yes, in the desert there is built a home for freedom. Genius is made strong to rear the monuments of man beneath the dome of a new heaven. Myriads assemble there, whom the proud lords of man in rage or fear drive from their wasted homes. The boon I pray is this, that Cythna shall be convoyed there. Nay, start not at the name America, and then to you this night Laon will betray. With me do what ye will, I am your foe. The light of such a joy as makes the stare of hungry snakes like living emeralds glow, shone in 100 human eyes. Where is Laon? Haste, fly, drag him swiftly here. We grant thy boon. I put no trust in ye. Swear by the power ye dread. We swear, the stranger threw his vest back suddenly and smiled in gentle pride and said, Lo, I am he. The Revolt of Islam, Canto 12. The transport of a fierce and monstrous gladness spread through the multitudinous streets, fast flying upon the winds of fear from his dull madness. The starveling waked and died in joy, the dying among the corpses in stark agony lying, just heard the happy tidings and in hope closed their faint eyes, from house to house replying with loud acclaim. The living shock heaven's cope and filled the startled earth with echoes morn did ope. Its pale eyes then, and lo, the long array of guards in golden arms, and priests beside, singing their bloody hymns, whose garbs betray the blackness of the faith it seems to hide, and see the tyrant's gem-wrought chariot glide among the gloomy cowls and glittering spears. A shape of light is sitting by his side, a child most beautiful, aye, the mists appear Laon, exempt alone from mortal hopes and fears. His head and feet are bare, his hands are bound behind with heavy chains, yet none do reek. Their scoffs on him through myriads throng around. There are no sneers upon his lip which speak that scorn or hate has made him bold. His cheek resolve has not turned pale. His eyes are mild and calm, and like the morn about to break, smile on mankind. His heart seems reconciled to all things and itself, like a reposing child. Tumult was in the soul of all beside, ill joy or doubt or fear, but those who saw their tranquil victim pass felt wonder glide into their brain and became calm with awe. See the slow pageant near the pile doth draw 1,000 torches in the spacious square, borne by the ready slaves of ruthless law. Await the signal round, the morning fair is changed to a dim night by that unnatural glare. And see beneath a sun-bright canopy, upon a platform level with the pile, the anxious tyrants sit enthroned on high, girt by the chieftains of the host. All smile in expectation, but one child, the while I, Laon, led by mutes, ascend my bier of fire, and look around. Each distant isle is dark in the bright dawn, towers far and near pierce like reposing flames the tremulous atmosphere. There was such silence through the host as when an earthquake trampling on some populous town has crushed 10,000 with one tread, and men expect the second. All were mute but one, that fairest child who, bold with love, alone stood up before the king, without avail, pleading for Laon's life. Her stifled groan was heard, she trembled like one aspen pale among the gloomy pines of a Norwegian vale. What were his thoughts linked in the morning sun among those reptiles stingless with delay? Even like a tyrant's wrath the signal gun roared hark again. In that dread pause he lay as in a quiet dream, the slaves obey. 1,000 torches drop, and hark the last bursts on that awful silence far away. Millions with hearts that beat both loud and fast watch for the springing flame, expectant and aghast. They fly, the torches fall, a cry of fear has startled the triumphant, they retreat. For ere the cannon's roar has died, they hear the tramp of hoofs like earthquake, and a steed dark and gigantic with the tempest's speed bursts through their ranks. A woman sits thereon, fairer it seems than aught that earth can breed, calm, radiant like the phantom of the dawn, a spirit from the caves of daylight wandering gone. All thought it was God's angel come to sweep the lingering guilty to their fiery grave. The tyrant from his throne in dread did leap, her innocence his child from fear did save. Scared by the faith they feigned, each priestly slave knelt for his mercy, whom they served with blood, and like the refluence of a mighty wave, sucked into the loud sea, the multitude with crushing panic fled in terror's altered mood. They pause, they blush, they gaze, a gathering shout bursts like one sound from the 10,000 streams of a tempestuous sea, that sudden rout one checked, who never in his mildest dreams felt awe from grace or loveliness. The seams of his rent heart so hard and cold, a creed had seared with blistering ice, but he misdeems that he is wise, whose words do only bleed inly for self. Thus thought the Iberian priest indeed, and others too thought he was wise to see in pain and fear and hate something divine, in love and beauty no divinity. Now with a bitter smile, whose light did shine like a fiend's hope upon his lips and eyne, he said, and the persuasion of that sneer rallied his trembling comrades, is it mine to stand alone when kings and soldiers fear a woman? Heaven has sent its other victim here. Were it not impious, said the king, to break our holy oath, impious to keep it say, shrieked the exulting priest, slaves to the stake, bind her, and on my head the burden lay of her just torments at the judgment day. Will I stand up before the golden throne of heaven and cry, to thee did I betray an infidel, but for me she would have known another moment's joy, the glory be thine own. They trembled but replied not, nor obeyed, pausing in breathless silence. Cythna sprung from her gigantic steed, who like a shade chased by the winds those vacant streets among, fled tameless as the brazen rein she flung upon his neck, and kissed his moon brow, a piteous sight that one so fair and young, the clasp of such a fearful death should woo, with smiles of tender joy as beamed from Cythna now. The warm tears burst in spite of faith and fear from many a tremulous eye, but like soft dews which feed spring's earliest buds, hung gathered there. Frozen by doubt, alas, they could not choose but weep, for when her faint limbs did refuse to climb the pyre, upon the moots she smiled, and with her eloquent gestures and the hues of her quick lips, even as a weary child wins sleep from some fond nurse with its caresses mild, she won them, though unwilling, her to bind near me among the snakes. When there had fled one soft reproach that was most thrilling kind, she smiled on me, and nothing then we said, but each upon the other's countenance fed looks of insatiate love. The mighty veil which doth divide the living and the dead was almost rent, the world grew dim and pale, all light in heaven or earth beside our love did fail. Yet one brief elapse, like the last beam of dying flames, the stainless air around hung silent and serene. A blood-red gleam burst upwards, hurling fiercely from the ground. The globe's smoke, I heard the mighty sound of its uprise, like a tempestuous ocean, and through its chasms I saw, as in a sword, the tyrant's child fall without life or motion, before his throne subdued by some unseen emotion. And is this death? The pyre has disappeared, the pestilence, the tyrant and the throng. The flames grow silent, slowly there is heard the music of a breath-suspending song, which like the kiss of love when life is young, steeps the faint eyes in darkness sweet and deep. With ever-changing notes it floats along, till on my passive soul there seemed to creep a melody like waves on wrinkled sands that leap. The warm touch of a soft and tremulous hand wakened me then. Low Cythna sate, reclined beside me on the waved and golden sand of a clear pool upon a bank twined with strange and star-bright flowers, which to the wind breathed divine odour. High above was spread the emerald heaven of trees of unknown kind, whose moonlight blooms and bright fruit overhead, a shadow which was light upon the waters shed. And round about sloped many a lawny mountain, with incest-bearing forests and vast caves of marble radiance, to that mighty fountain. And when the flood his own bright margin laves, their echoes talk with its eternal waves, which from the depths whose jagged caverns breed their unreposing strife it lifts and heaves, till through a chasm of hills they roll and feed a river deep, which flies with smooth but arrowy speed. As we sate gazing in a trance of wonder, a boat approached, borne by the musical air along the waves which sung and sparkled under its rapid keel. A winged shape sate there, a child with silver shining wings, so fair that as her bark did through the waters glide, the shadow of the lingering waves did wear lights as from starry beams from side to side, while veering to the wind her plumes the bark to guide. The boat was one curved shell of hollow pearl, almost translucent with the light divine of her within. The prow and stern did curl, horned on high like the young moon supine. When o'er dim twilight mountains dark with pine it floats upon the sunset sea of beams, whose golden waves in many a purple line fade fast, till borne on sunlight's ebbing streams, dilating on earth's verge the sunken meteor gleams. Its keel was struck the sands beside our feet. Then Cythna turned to me, and from our eyes, which swam with unshed tears, a look more sweet and happy love, a wild and glad surprise glanced as she spake. Aye, this is paradise and not a dream, and we are all united. Lo, that is mine own child, who in the guise of madness came, like day to one benighted, in lonesome woods. My heart is now too well requited. And then she wept aloud, and in her arms clasped that bright shade, less marvellously fair than her own human hues and living charms, which as she leaned in passioned silence there, breathed warm on the cold bosom of the air, which seemed to blush and tremble with delight. The glossy darkness of her streaming hair fell o'er that snowy child, and wrapped from sight the fond and long embrace which did their hearts unite. Then the bright child she plumed, seraph, came, and fixed its blue and beaming eyes on mine, and said, I was disturbed by tremulous shame, when once we met, yet knew that I was thine, from the same hour in which thy lips divine kindled a clinging dream within my brain, which ever waked when I might sleep to twine thine image with her memory dear again. We meet exempted now from mortal fear or pain. When the consuming flames had wrapped ye round, the hope which I had cherished went away. I fell in agony on the senseless ground, and hid mine eyes in dust, and far astray my mind was gone, when bright like dawning day the spectre of the plague before me flew, and breathed upon my lips, and seemed to say, they wait for thee, beloved. Then I knew the death mark on my breast, and became calm anew. It was the calm of love, for I was dying. I saw the black and half-extinguished pyre in its own grey and shrunken ashes lying. The pitchy smoke of the departed fire still hung in many a hollow dome and spire above the towers, like night beneath whose shade are wed by the ending of their own desire. The army stood. A vacancy was made in expectation's depth, and so they stood dismayed. The frightful silence of that altered mood, the tortures of the dying clove alone, till one uprose among the multitude and said, the flood of time is rolling on, we stand upon its brink, whilst they are gone to glide in peace down death's mysterious stream. Have ye done well? They mould of flesh and bone, who might have made this life's envenomed dream a sweeter draught than ye will ever taste, I deem. These perish as the good and great of yore have perished, and their murderers will repent. Yes, vain and barren tears shall flow before yon smoke has faded from the firmament, even for this cause, that ye who must lament the death of those that made this world so fair cannot recall them now, but there is lent to man the wisdom of a high despair, when such can die and he live on and linger here. Aye, ye may fear not now the pestilence from fabled hell, as by a charm withdrawn, All power and faith must pass, since calmly hence in pain and fire have unbelievers gone, and ye must sadly turn away and moan in secret to his home, each one returning, and to long ages shall this hour be known, and slowly shall its memory ever burning fill this dark night of things with an eternal mourning. For me that world is grown to void and cold, since hope pursues immortal destiny. With steps thus slow, therefore shall we behold how those who love yet fear not dare to die. Tell to your child this. Then suddenly he sheathed the dagger in his heart and fell. My brain grew dark in death, and yet to me there came a murmur from the crowd to tell of deep and mighty change which suddenly befell. Then suddenly I stood a winged thought before the immortal senate, and the seat of the star-shining spirit whence is wrought the strength of its dominion good and great, the better genius of this world's estate. His realm around one mighty fane is spread, Elysian islands bright and fortunate, calm dwellings of the free and happy dead, where I am sent to lead. These winged words she said, and with the silence of her eloquent smile bade us embark in her divine canoe. Then at the helm we took our seat, and while above her head those plumes of dazzling hue into the wind's invisible stream she threw, sitting beside the prow, like gossamer on the swift breath of morn, the vessel flew o'er the bright whirlpools of that fountain fair, whose shores receded fast, while we seemed lingering there. Till down that mighty stream, dark, calm and fleet, between a chasm of cedarn mountains riven, chased by the thronging winds whose viewless feet, as swift as twinkling beams had under heaven, from woods and waves wild sounds and odours driven, the boat fled visibly 3 nights and days, borne like a cloud through morn and noon and even. We sailed along the winding watery ways of the vast stream, a long and labyrinthine maze, a scene of joy and wonder to behold, that river's shapes and shadows changing ever, where the broad sunrise filled with deepening gold its whirlpools, where all hues did spread and quiver, and where melodious falls did burst and shiver, among rocks clad with flowers the foam and spray sparkled like stars upon the sunny river, or when the moonlight poured a holier day, one vast and glittering lake around green islands lay. Morn, noon and even that boat of pearl outran the streams which bore it, like the arrowy cloud of tempest, or the speedier thought of man, which flieth forth and cannot make abode. Sometimes through forests deep like night we glode, between the walls of mighty mountains crowned with cyclopean piles, whose turrets proud the homes of the departed dimly frowned over the bright waves which girt their dark foundations round. Sometimes between the wide and flowering meadows, mile after mile we sailed, and 'twas delight to see far off the sunbeams chase the shadows over the grass, sometimes beneath the night of wide and vaulted caves, whose roofs were bright with starry gems. We fled whilst from their deep and dark green chasms, shades beautiful and white, amid sweet sounds across our path would sweep, like swift and lovely dreams that walk the waves of sleep. And ever as we sailed, our minds were full of love and wisdom, which were overflowing converse wild and sweet and wonderful, and in quick smiles whose light would come and go like music o'er wide waves, and in the flow of sudden tears, and in the mute caress, for a deep shade was cleft, and we did know that virtue, though obscured on earth, not less survives all mortal change in lasting loveliness. 3 days and nights we sailed, as thought and feeling numbered delightful hours. For though the sky, the sphered lamps of day and night, revealing new changes and new glories, rolled on high, sun, moon, and moonlight lamps, the progeny of a diviner heaven, serene and fair on the 4th day, wild as a wind-wrought sea, the stream became and faster bear the spirit-winged boat steadily speeding there. Steady and swift where the waves rolled like mountains within the vast ravine, whose rifts did pour tumultuous floods from their 10,000 fountains, the thunder of whose earth uplifting roar made the air sweep in whirlwinds from the shore. Calm as a shade, the boat of that fair child securely fled that rapid stress before, amid the topmost spray and sunbows wild, wreathed in the silver mist of joy and pride we smiled. The torrent of that wide and raging river is past, and our aerial speed suspended. We look behind, a golden mist did quiver, when its wild surges with the lake were blended. Our bark hung there as on a line suspended between two heavens, that windless, waveless lake, which 4 great cataracts from 4 vales attended by mists, aye feed from the rocks and clouds they break, and of that azure sea a silent refuge make. Motionless, resting on the lake a while, I saw its marge of snow-bright mountains rear. Their peaks aloft, I saw each radiant isle, and in the midst afar, even like a sphere hung in one hollow sky, did there appear the temple of the spirit. On the sound which issued thence, draw nearer and more near, like the swift moon this glorious earth around, the charmed boat approached, and there its haven found.